Everybody, welcome. This is the first Writers Atelier workshop for NaNoWriMo. We were so lucky to have Angelique do this for us. We really are, because we love Angelique and we admire her very intense plotting skills.
That's one way of saying it.
I am a pantser,
Just
so
wait.
I have to. I'm gonna be extra about it.
Throwing shade.
But Angelique gets very excited about planning, and also she is really good at planning. She's published 1,000 million gazillion trillion novels this year. But she's really great. In all seriousness, she is really great at managing her time and really being disciplined and putting the words on a page. And that's why I wanted her to talk to you guys today, because she's going to kind of share how she gets ready for Nano. All of us, we all have different ways, and there's no one right way, which is why we're going to hear from a variety of voices over this month. But Angelique is the first, and I absolutely love all the things that Angelique does to prepare herself to get ready to write. So Angelique, you may take it away, and I will be silent.
Thank you for that. So you're starting with the craziest one first.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because intense might be a very good word to use to describe the approach I take to writing. But I'm also currently in the position to write full time, which makes a big difference in my productivity level and where I'm at right now. So keep that in mind as you're listening to all of this, because I've kind of gone through and we'll be talking mostly about like prepping for Nano, and it's kind of more of a process driven presentation. This is my process to getting stuff done. And most of this started and was developed the year I did my very first NaNoWriMo, which was in 2016. And I wrote my first, or my debut novel in 2016 during my first NaNoWriMo experience. So a lot of what I am going to be sharing today is what I did and the tools I used, at least half of them I used during that very first and preparing for that very first NaNoWriMo. And then it all kind of led to where I'm at today. So let me go ahead and share my screen. See if I can get this presentation kind of going. Sorry, I have two screens here. So you guys see the presentation itself? Let me see if I can blow it up.
Yeah, we see that.
Are you seeing the slide?
No,
the actual?
It's up there now.
Yeah.
Are you seeing the full screen or my?
Full screen.
It is full screen.
Okay, you're seeing the full screen. Okay, because I have two computer screens. My big one and then my laptop, which has my camera on it. So I wanted to make sure you see the full one and not the slideshow. Here's the one coming next with the preview of the next slide. So you're seeing the full screen. Perfect. Okay, so this is my process prepping for NaNoWriMo and everything that I do. So, but before I get started, for those of you, I know some of you know me, but for those of you who don't know me, I am Angelique Bochnak. I write under two pen names. The first one is AM Bochnak. This is where I started my writing career, writing science fiction and fantasy. My debut novel is Fortitude Rising. It's the first cover you see here with the red swirly. This was my very first NaNoWriMo project. It was it was a huge learning experience for me to get this novel written and then revised and edited and ready to go. And it took me, so I wrote it in 2016 and I published it in 2018. So it was from writing to completion, it was a 2-year process. And since then, I've written and published several other novels under this pen name. This first series is going to be a 4-book series, and so 3 of the books are out. The 4th one, if all goes according to plan, the 4th one will be published in 2021. And I've got some other projects with some short stories coming out, which are more of an epic fantasy, which you see there, The Dragon's Pearl and the Ravage, the Mountain of Darkness. But I also recently, I guess in 2020, this year, started writing under another pen name, Aria Bliss. And under this pen name, I write contemporary romance. And this has been my dominant focus in 2020. And the books that you see here are the books, 3 of them, the first 3 are published, and then Charm Me comes out on Tuesday, and then the last one you see there, Stuck Together, will come out the week of Thanksgiving. I've really put a lot of energy and effort into getting these books out this year, and everything I'm kind of going to go through that I started with that very first NaNoWriMo in 2016 led to this process that made it possible for me to actually plan and write and execute and publish this many novels in a single year. If it hadn't been for this process that I went through in developing these habits, I wouldn't have been able to get this done. Hold on one second. The waiting room. Okay. Sorry. So anyway, so this is me. I am AM Bochnak, Angelique Bochnak, AM Bochnak, Aria Bliss, all wrapped up into this crazy little package. So today we're going to talk predominantly about, slide move, okay, planning and planning rules. Without planning, I would never get anything done. Nothing would happen. My life would cease to move forward, and it would just be a disaster. The minute I stop focusing on my monthly, weekly, and daily plans is the moment I stop being productive. Because great things happen when you plan for them. If you don't plan for the great things that you want to have happen in your life, they're less likely to happen, or it'll take a lot longer for them to happen. So planning rules. And that is really what most of this presentation is going to be about, is the planning. I really kind of developed this presentation to be more of just like listening to me talk about my process. I don't really foresee you needing to take any notes there's nothing on my slides that's like, oh, scribble all this information down or I'm going to lose something valuable. It's more, this is my process. This is how I prep. This is how I get things done. And if there's something in this for you to take away and apply to your own daily practices in your writing career, fantastic. Or you can just be like, that girl's crazy, and you walk away and try to forget that I said anything, whichever works best for you. But anyway, planning rules. Without planning, nothing would get done. So we're going to talk about a few of my favorite things. For those of you who know me, you know that I am a crazy, insane outliner and plotter. Those of you who are pantsers, I have no clue how you function. Good on you for being able to get a story done and write a novel by pantsing it. I can't relate, but it amazes me that you guys can do that. I am an insane outliner and plotter. I'm going to touch on this a little bit, but I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on outlining and plotting, because that is a whole nother presentation for a whole nother day. And plus there's so many different approaches to plotting and outlining. I didn't want to get into that. I'm just going to kind of highlight my approach and how I implement that through these tools and systems that I have in place. My second favorite thing, and if this ceased to exist, I would be completely lost, is Scrivener. I know some people don't like it. Some people love it. I am a huge fan of Scrivener, and I can't function as a writer without it. Every single thing I write gets done in Scrivener. We're going to talk about tracking numbers. I'm a big fan of numbers. I am a numbers person, 100%. Without numbers, I have no way of judging or basing my success. I'm going to talk about how I use bullet journaling to track progress on projects. Pretty planners, as I've mentioned, planning rules. A little bit about dictation and how I've started using dictation recently, and a recovery plan. And what I mean, and we'll get into that and what I mean about a recovery plan, which I think is very important as you to think about how you're going to recover from slips and missed goals, especially during something like Nano, where you're trying to achieve a certain amount of writing in 30 days. And then my last and most favorite thing is obviously writing. Everything I do here takes me to that final step of actually writing the stories or novels or whatever it is I'm trying to get done. So we'll just jump right into it. Outlining and plotting. I am a plot-driven writer 100%. Everything is about the plot when it comes to me. The basic things, like I am very much a 3-act structure plotter. I think about the 3 acts, act 1, act 2, act 3, what needs to happen in those parts of a novel, character development. And once I have those things kind of nailed down, like who my characters are and who they're going to be and what my basic plot is, I sit down and I'm that person that I do a chapter by chapter outline. I know if I'm writing a 60,000 word novel, I know how many chapters that's typically going to be for my writing style. And I plan out each of those chapters and have them outlined and ready to go. And once I have the chapter by chapter outlines done, I go scene by scene and I plan out every single scene I plan on writing for that particular story. And then once I have those things down, I kind of go back and I think in great detail about the emotional drivers and the wounds and the motivations of the characters and how those things are going to play into all of those things I want to have happen throughout that story. And always keeping in mind as I'm planning and writing this of what the internal and external plot points are, those character driven and event driven things that happen throughout a story. So this is always my step one. I sit down, I think about all of these things. This is the most important part of my entire prepping process, is getting this outline done before I start writing a single word. And then once I have this done, I move into Scrivener. And my Scrivener, and I've got some screenshots of my Scrivener file that I did for the novel I have coming out on Tuesday, of how I take that outline I've created and I insert that into Scrivener. And I created basically a Scrivener template that I pull up every time I'm ready to start writing a novel that has, and I have it based on how many words I think the story is going to be. So this first series that I've been writing, they're all novellas, so they're about approximately 30,000 words. And typically for me, that's about 14 chapters. This particular novella ended up being a little bit longer. In fact, it's not even a novella anymore. It's a full-length novel, clocking in at almost 50,000 words. So this one became a little bit bigger. So I ended up adding a little chapters. And sometimes, I'm not so rigid that I stick to that. It grew a little bit. But I start by each of these acts. You see the bar here to the right, where I have each act, I insert each of the chapters, all the information that's going into those, and then all the information for each of the scenes and a brief description of what that scene should be, so that when it's time to sit down and write, I have this entire file ready to go. So if I was sitting down to start NaNoWriMo, I would have all of this done before November 1st. So on November 1st, I was ready to sit down and I would open chapter 1, my files for chapter 1. And I think chapter 1 had 2 scenes in it, and the scene descriptions would be there to tell me what I was going to write about that day. And then I would get to writing, because I would know what I'm going to be writing. I'd be prepared and be all set and ready to go. And so this is a big part of my prep work that I do before I ever start writing a single word in a story. Most people don't get this in depth, and that's totally okay. Some people may just have rough ideas of what the first part of the act 1 will be about, and then they plan it out and break it out as they start writing that way. But when you're approaching something like Nano and you have these daily goals and you're trying to get something done, personally, I highly recommend that you do a little bit more planning in advance so that you at least have a better idea of what you're going to write about, so you're not spending valuable writing time, especially if your writing time is limited, on trying to figure out what you're going to write about. You already know what that's going to be, and at least you have an idea of what that might be. Even if you just decide the night before, after you finish writing a section, it's helpful to have all this together in advance. But again, I realize most people don't take it this far, but I get intense with my plotting. It's one of my favorite parts about writing, is the actual planning and plotting of them. So once I get all this right and I'm starting to write, the next thing is tracking numbers. And this is probably my favorite thing about Nano, and it's what Nano taught me, is the importance of keeping track of your numbers. Especially when you're setting goals. For me, like, my goals have to have a number associated with them, or I won't know if I'm succeeding or failing or falling behind. And that's what Nano taught me. The first time I did Nano, it really taught me the importance of keeping track of those numbers, those daily word count goals. So when you're writing Nano, 50,000 words in a month, it's 1,667 words a day. And having that number to track is so, so important with keeping you focused on what the goal is. And so tracking numbers is a huge part of every process. And I have multiple ways I track numbers to ingrain that. And I do this because it really ingrains into me how important those numbers are. If I want to reach these goals and get so much and get a novel done in a certain amount of time, keeping track of these numbers is critical for my process. So if you're doing Nano, this is a screenshot of the Nano website of when I wrote that first novel. This is my first year of doing Nano. And I thought there was because I was working a full-time job at this time. I'm a wife, I have kids, and I thought there was no way. I was concerned about getting 50,000 words done in a month. But once I got into this, I very quickly, within a few days, grasp that concept of keeping track of those numbers and focusing on my writing time. And I exceeded that goal and ended up writing over 75,000 words for my very first Nano and completed the first draft of my first novel. It wasn't a great first draft, but hey, it was done and that was the goal, right? But being able to keep track of those numbers became such a critical part of my overall writing process, and preparing tools for myself to keep track of those numbers as part of my prep work. And so I since that first Nano and over the past year, I've reached a point in my writing career where I kind of treat every single day like it's NaNoWriMo. It has become a daily habit of mine to write every single day. And if I come across a day that I don't write, it's either because I got so wrapped up in marketing or something else writing related, or I didn't feel good, or there was a really good reason why I didn't write. Otherwise, I write every single day, 7 days a week. That is my writing life now. And so I created this spreadsheet because I've created what I've called the ultimate goal, where now my goal was to write 1,800 words a day for the next 441 days. And I started this a few weeks ago. So I created this log sheet to keep track of these numbers because I need to see things. I need to have I need to be able to physically hold my results in my hand. It's not enough for me to have a spreadsheet or like the website of Nano. So even when I did Nano, I had external ways I tracked my numbers, so I had something to hold and actually physically see. For me, that's important for me to keep me on track. Not everybody needs to do that, but if you're that way and you need to have a physical item that you can pick up and look at and see your goals and see how you've done, I have a few tips of things that I've done that have been really, really helpful for me. And one of them is this external spreadsheet, this log sheet, where I log it down every single day. And that helps me keep track of the numbers, something that I can quantify the level of success and if I'm meeting the goals that I've set for myself. And once you start doing this, if you start thinking this way, and Nano's really good at enforcing this kind of a habit, it's easier to then see how you can translate that into a longer term goal when it's not NaNoWriMo. So there's a lot of things, if you focus on some of these habits during NaNoWriMo, you can then see how you can apply those beyond NaNoWriMo to other projects or other, if you want to make writing a full-time or more longer term part of your life. So the other thing that I do is bullet journaling. And so I also do art on the side. And so that's one of the reasons why I love bullet journaling as well. And so that first year that I did NaNoWriMo, in addition to the website, the image you see here, the snapshot you see in the center of the 50,000 word, that was my goal for that first Nano. I created this chart to help me track, every time I finished a day, and I got to color in a little section and write down those numbers and keep track of what I was doing and how I got there. This was my physical proof that I was reaching that goal. Another thing that I did to document that, to track those numbers, to help keep me focused on NaNoWriMo. And this actually helped me better than anything else because I had this I wanted to fill this whole thing in with color. I wanted the whole thing to be done, and I wasn't going to screw that up, because if I didn't, then this was going to be forever in my journal. And I don't get rid of journals. I keep them forever. And I wasn't going to let this be left in that journal without being fully colored in. And I did the same thing the next year. The circle, I decided instead of doing the bar, I did a circle. And I filled that in throughout the year, throughout the month of NaNoWriMo. And again, these are things that I do that help me stay focused, because I didn't want this to be in my journal unfinished. And so by doing little things like that, it helped me stay focused. And so I could get this prepared in advance and have it ready to go. So the day that NaNoWriMo started, I was ready to start coloring these things in, and to prove, and so by figuring out little things that make you tick, or like a little, this was almost like my little reward system. My daily reward system was getting to fill in a color of a block. And for me, having a reward system to tie to my daily writing goals really, really helps me meet those goals. And so this was another thing that I did during my first couple NaNoWriMos that I still continue to do to this day for my other projects, because it's fun, it's a reward, it makes me happy to see these filled in and colored. And we all need little rewards that we give ourselves, right? So the next thing that I am really big on is planners, pretty little planners. I love my planners. When I first started planning, I stuck almost solely to the bullet journaling approach to planning. And I would find that I would often slip. I would fill out all my bullet journal pages, and then I'd have them all ready to go to fill in for a month. And then I wouldn't plan anything for that month. I would create the pages in my bullet journal, but then I wouldn't actually use the pages I created, which defeats the whole purpose of doing it, right? So then I discovered, when I bought my first pretty planner, and if you've actually looked at some of these planners are not cheap. And when you spend, say, $70 to $100 on a planner, you're more likely to use that planner because you've invested so much money into that planner. And so that's what I've started doing over the last couple of years. So now I invest in these planners in advance, and I found that I'm more likely to use it because I've put that money into it. Whereas for a bullet journal, I'm usually only spending like maybe $15-20 on the actual journal, and I'm not losing as much by not using it. And so this was something that I did that really helped me stay focused on those goals and that plans, and putting those plans down, because if I don't write my monthly, weekly, daily plans down, I'm less likely to get them done. And when you're doing something like Nano, it's important to know what those plans are. And even if you know, like in advance, 1,667 words a day, you know that, you don't need to write that down, but I still write it down because that's my daily reminder. Okay, I write it down. It's reinforcing that this is what I have to do. So I do that every single day. So just to give you a snapshot of what I do in those journals, like these are my journal pages. Like I fill these suckers in. I write things down. I keep track. So in addition to the log sheet that I showed you for tracking my words, and the pretty pictures and diagrams I create, I still write the daily word count in the monthly spread of my planners. And so all of that gets written down, and all of that is there to keep track of, and I add all that up. And I'm also, I love stickers. I've always loved stickers. I've loved stickers since I was a little girl. I used to have sticker books. And so I've also learned that that is a great reward system for me. I meet a goal, I can put a sticker on that day in my journal. And so I want that sticker on that day, and remarkably enough, that is enough incentive to make me reach that daily word count goal, because I've got to fill that sticker in. A missing sticker makes me very sad. So it's like finding little things like that really do make a big difference in helping you stay focused and achieve those goals that you want to achieve. So these things have been invaluable to me through this writing process. And again, I started these things with my first NaNoWriMo, and these have stuck with me and have become permanent daily habits that have now made it possible for me to actually sit down and say, you know what, yes, I can write 1,800 words a day. And that is a realistic goal for me. 2 years ago, that would not have been a realistic goal for me. I had to work up towards that goal. And these things, these tools helped me be able to do that. And they may not seem like a lot, but it's a great self-accountability process to when you write these things down, and especially if you write them down in multiple forms in multiple ways, to reinforce how important those things can be. So now I want to step into some newer things that I've started doing recently that I didn't do when I wrote that first novel, but I use now, and they've been they become invaluable resources as well. The first thing is Dictation. I've heard lots of authors tell me that they've used Dictation. I've heard say, like, speech to text, speak your novel out. And honestly, at this point now, I don't know why it took me so long to try this. But recently, over the last month, and I've always known that a lot of my best ideas come to me when I go for my morning walks. And I like to go for a walk in the morning for about an hour, and that's when my brain is at its best and all the ideas will come to me, but I'm walking and I never had a way to put those ideas down. So I started dictating to my phone while I'm on my walks, and suddenly my productivity has skyrocketed and gone through the roof because I've started doing this. To the point I've even created Google Docs with my outline in them, so I can open that up on my phone and have my outline there, know what I'm going to be writing that day. And then I open up my app that I use and I start dictating each of the scenes to my phone, to the point where I've been able to now speech to text, like a couple thousand words of a novel in 10 minutes. And that is amazing. That is an amazing level of productivity. It does take some practice to learn how to speak to the app or whatever tool you're using. But once you get that figured out, now that I'm going through the revision process, it has sped up my writing process by tenfold. It's like the level of productivity that I'm seeing from just this one little change has been amazing. I have an Android phone, and I started using an app called Otter. It works fabulously. The only trouble I have with it is if you don't have good cellular service, then it doesn't translate what you've said to text. And so, a workaround from that is when I get back to my desk, I can replay that to either Google Docs or Word or back to the app itself, and then it will translate it to text because it does. So that's the only downfall that I've come across with that one. So I've also started on, if I'm walking in an area where I don't have good cellular service, I'll use Google Docs because that works pretty well that works pretty well. It doesn't do as good with punctuations and paragraph breaks and things like that as Otter does, but it still gets the text on the page. If you have an iPhone, I know there's other apps and things to use. And if you're sitting in front of your computer, you can use Word to dictate. And this has really helped me expedite and speed up my writing process. And so during something like NaNoWriMo, this could be a great tool for you if you're short on a day and say you only have 10 minutes, that's all you could spare. Talk out a scene to your phone or to a Word document or something, just to get those words down, because it's better to get the words down out of your head onto the page than to just skip it and not get it done at all. Because then you risk forgetting what you might have wanted to write or what was in your mind at that time. So this has been a really, really useful tool, and I highly recommend it. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is a recovery plan. Without a recovery plan, you have no plan on how you're going to make up missed words. So when life throws you a curveball, and it's going to, you need to be prepared to step up to the plate and knock it out of the park. You need to take control of every single action you take. And life happens. Things get in the way all the time. You'll miss a day of writing. We all do it. You need to have a plan on how you're going to recover from those days. Is if you don't, you're just going to keep getting behind and getting behind. And so if you want to make sure that you reach that goal of, say, like for Nano, 50,000 words, if you have to miss a day, how are you going to make that up? And it's important to have that plan in place so that you're in complete control of what's going on. So we're not perfect, but if you have a plan, you will recover. And I think the most important thing to remind yourself of is to forgive yourself when these things happen. Because we tend to be, at least maybe not we, I tend to be really, really hard on myself when I miss a goal. Even if it's a daily goal, I tend to be extremely hard on myself and not give myself room to just relax and realize that I'm going to make it up. And I recommend that when you know you're going to miss or you do miss, develop a plan to recover over several days, not one. So if you're right in the middle of Nano and you miss a complete day of writing, so you've just missed, 1,700 words, you don't have to make those words up the next day. If you're at the beginning of the month, you can spread those words out over 7 days. 7 days, add another 237 words to your next day's word count until you get those days back up. And if you recall, I showed this chart here at the beginning of my ultimate goal of writing 1,800 words a day for the next 441 days. And you'll see that there's some purple highlights and there's some green highlights. The purple highlights are the days I missed the goal. Like I started this and I missed the goal the first 3 days of this ultimate goal that I created for myself. I didn't stress about it. I wasn't worried about it because I was like, I'm going to make it up. I have 441 days to do this, right? And then I discovered Dictation, and then suddenly I'm not behind at all anymore. And I'm actually way ahead of my goal. And so that's another one of my recovery plans is like, so when I set a goal for myself to write 1,800 words a day, like that's the physical goal that I've written down. But in my mind, I'm like, write 2,000 words a day. What's 200 more words? You can do that. Because if you work ahead, so then if you do miss a day, you're not as far behind. So that's another way of thinking about a recovery plan, is always trying to work ahead of the daily goal. So you have a buffer for those days that you do miss. And like I said, Dictation has been really, really great for my recovery plan and helping me get back, because I've been able to sit down sometimes and talk out 3 or 4 chapters in a single day. And then once those are down, then I've gotten several thousand words down and I'm way far ahead of my goal. And it helps relieve some of that stress and shows me that there's a lot of, you can get a lot done when you think outside the box and take a different approach to writing. So I have a couple kind of bonus prep tips, advice I wanted to go over. The first one, which is a big part of my prep work for writing, is reading. I read every single day. Depending on what I'm writing, if I'm writing fantasy and I want to prepare to write a fantasy and I want to get my mindset into writing fantasy, I read a fantasy novel. And that's a huge part of my prep work. So like right now I'm writing a romance. And so my focus is reading romance and reading in that specific genre that I'm trying to write. And that gets my mindset in the right frame of mind and focus and what the market is currently looking for. And I try to read more recent books that are currently being published so that I make sure that whatever words I'm putting down on the page and how it's written is going to fit reader expectation. And so this for me it's a huge part of my prep work. And I highly recommend that whatever you have planned to write for NaNoWriMo, you find a comp novel that fits with what you are thinking about writing, and you just read it as 10 minutes a day. Just one, it's relaxing, and 2, it'll get you in the right frame of mind and mindset to be ready to write the novel you want to write. And the last thing I want to talk about today, and this is more of an advanced bonus tip. We're going to really show just how crazy Angelique is today, bonus tip. I'm calling it my Step It Up bonus. And this is something that I started doing in 2020. In 2020, yeah, I started to say 2021. It's not 2021, 2020. Because once I decided to write in 2 different pen names and I had all these different projects that I was focused on, I needed a way to organize all of those projects so that I knew what I was working on, what I had in the pipeline, what I had coming. And so in my first career as I worked in consulting, mostly what I did was project management. And so as writers, when we have multiple writing projects that we're working on, these are multiple projects that we're managing at the same time. Like right now, I'm not writing one novel at a time. In the last few weeks, I've been working on 3 novels at once. And so I have to manage my time to get to focus on those 3 novels and when I'm going to be focusing on those 3 novels. One of them was about to drop off my plate come Friday, because it's coming out next week, and then I'll have the 2. But then a 3rd one will come in and replace that, and I'll start outlining another one so that it's ready to go when I finish up one of the others that I'm currently working on. And so in order to be able to do that, you need to be able to manage all of those ideas and projects at one time, as well as your future project list. What do you have in the pipeline that you want to write next? And so I started using, early in 2020, I started using this online tool called ClickUp. It is a project management tool. It might freak, if you've never done project management before or used a project management system, it might freak you out. Either way, it's a great resource, and I use it, and it does so much more than what I actually use it for, because you can use it for teams and full-on businesses and everything. I use it for process, task, and time management. And there's a lot of other things that it does, but those are the 3 things I predominantly use it for. Just to give you an example, like just kind of show you what like the inner workings of ClickUp looks like. This is like my main list page for Aria Bliss of the current projects that I'm working on. And so I have my current projects that I'm working on is the After Hours Affair, which is the ones I'm currently publishing. And then I have 3 other book series ideas. Some of them are already plotted out and ready to go, waiting for me to have time to write them. Some of them are still in the idea phase and development phase. But as soon as I have an idea for a writing project or series or a book, it goes in this system. So I have it documented, and it's now in my queue so that I know that it's here. It's going to come up one of these days. And when it's time to write that one, it comes up to the front and I start working on it. I do the same thing with AM Bochnak. And I can add start dates and deadlines. And as soon as I have those start dates and deadlines in there, I now have triggers to email me or whatever way you prefer to be communicated with, to let me know that it's time to start this project, or this project is coming up, so that I know I need to stay focused on this. If I have a novel it's supposed to be finished by, I have one that I have planned to be finished by October 17th, I have triggers in there to notify me that this deadline is coming up to help keep me on track, so that I know I need to stay focused. And so this is a huge, huge part of my current progress and success of getting these books done in such a time. Now, I've been publishing since July. I've been publishing a book a month. And to stay on that and stay on top of that, tools like this have been extremely helpful to get me to that point. So this is kind of that beyond the NaNoWriMo phase. If you get through NaNoWriMo and you're like, I want to take this a step further and turn this into a full-time career, something like this could be extremely valuable to your success. In addition to the list form, there's calendars and Gantt charts and all other kinds of things in here. If you like the board approach to organizing projects, they have a board screen where everything is listed in the little cards, so you can move them around. They also have a mind map. So if you want to take a snapshot view of everything you have planned for upcoming books and projects, they're all right there. And you can see the various phases and stages that they're in. So this is like, if you're ready to get to the point, if you want to take your writing career to the next level and you need help organizing and getting everything done, I highly recommend an online system like this. ClickUp is free forever, unless you want to add certain features. They do have a paid version that adds additional features and options and things you can use, but as an independent single author, I don't need those additional tools. So the free version gives me everything I need for this. And so as free tools go, this is an extremely powerful process, task, and time management tool. And so if you, to keep writing at that level, like every day is NaNoWriMo, tools like this are extremely useful and valuable. So now, if you all don't think I'm crazy, here's where you can find me online. I saw that, Megan, as AM Bochnak. my website, ambochnak.com. You can email me at author@ambochnak.com or connect with me on social media, Goodreads, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I love talking about anything writing. So if you ever have any questions about anything related to writing or even publishing, I've published 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, over I think 12 books now over the past 3 years. So if you have any, and I've indie published everything. So if you have any questions about any of that, I'm happy to talk about it. I love talking about it. It's my favorite thing to talk about. And if you're interested more into the romance side of things, this is where you can find me as Aria Bliss. My website, it's ariabliss.com, or you can email me at aria@ariabliss.com or connect with me online anywhere. And again, I'm happy to talk about anything related to books. And I think that is everything that I have planned to talk about. So if there are any questions, I would be happy to entertain.
I also want to say, Angelique, could you also tell people about your book covers?
Oh, yes. So I also, so if you see my book covers here, all of these book covers and all of these book covers, I have designed all of these covers. I, under the business of Misadventure Press, which is the press that I publish all my work under, I also provide author services, and my favorite author services under those services are book cover design. I've done some covers for Megan and Carrie, so if you ever need book covers, I love to design book covers, and I'd be happy to work with you. So yes, and also formatting, book formatting, interior book formatting as well. I do custom formatting and InDesign. Make your book look beautiful and pretty and professional, to where nobody will be able to tell that especially if you want to indie publish, nobody will be able to tell the difference between whether it was indie published or traditionally published, which is ultimately our goal, right? So if you need that,
I have worked with Angelique on formatting, and she is spectacular.
Thank you.
Does anyone have questions? Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question you want to ask, or you can put it in the chat.
I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And if anybody wants to see anything again, I can always reshare, just so we can all see each other better.
And it looks like also we will have a recording of this. So we'll make that public, I'll do my best to get it up, get it posted and everything, hopefully by the end of the week. But so far it hasn't stopped doing anything. So I think we have to have the recording. We'll have the presentation recorded at least, right? So that's the important part. But feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question, or you can put it in the chat if you prefer.
Everybody just thinks I'm crazy.
Or you were very thorough.
No, I thought it was great. Thank you, Angelique. I like the ClickUp idea. I hadn't heard about that before.
I'm big on systems and finding systems that are easy to implement to keep on track.
Right.
And that has been, and especially since it's free. I was using a different system at one point, and it was only free for the first 30 days, and then they wanted me to pay $15 a month for it, and I liked it, but then I started looking for something different. I came across ClickUp, and it's a pretty powerful tool for it being free. And it really helps keep everything, and you can go as in depth with it as you want. Like under each of those lists, you can actually click into that, and you can I could insert my entire outline by scenes and chapters into all that information if I wanted to. I could actually use it as my planning and plotting tool as well if I wanted to. I use it more for future planning purposes and time management, to know what I have in the pipeline, what I have coming up, what I want to do next. And like I said, every time I have a new idea, it gets added to the list. Even if it just has a name, it gets added to the list. Just so
I like how it emails you reminders too, though.
Yeah, it does. Yes. As long as you set a deadline, it'll email you reminders. If you never give it a deadline, it won't do squat. It'll just sit there forever. So you have to be willing to put deadlines on things, because as soon as you have a deadline, then it'll keep you on track.
I think you need to check out the chat because there are quite a few people who are saying they don't think you're crazy. So
Oh, okay.
I think
I'm not
that's
crazy.
important for you to see.
Then you stick around a little bit longer. You'll
So
find out.
there's some like-minded people amongst us in the group. So you're among your people.
My people. But yeah, so.
Miranda thinks you're awesome.
No, well, thank you, Miranda. But yeah,
Alright.
so yeah, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to. Otherwise,
Jamie asked, how long in days and weeks do you spend on your detailed plotting?
That's a good question.
oh, okay, it depends. Sometimes if my inspiration is really flowing, I can sit down for like a solid 8 hours. And sometimes I do, because I love plotting. I love plotting. Sometimes I can sit down for an entire 8 hours and get an entire plot out, an entire outline from my character development to their wounds and their motivation and their background and their family and exactly what I think is going to happen to them in 8 hours. That's not common, but it happens. Normally, I will try to sit down, like I'll spend a couple hours a day for a week. To really hash it out. And I usually do a pretty good job at getting it all out, but then I have some concrete partners that I work with that if I get stuck, I'm like, hey, this ending isn't really coming to me. I need some advice, I need help, let's talk it out. And then sometimes talking it out for an hour or so, then it's all done. But so more realistically, a couple hours for 5 days. And then I have my pretty, but I also have a very detailed, structured approach now. So I'm one of those people. So when I decided to start writing in 2014, and I spent a year doing nothing but reading craft books on how to write. I had this idea and I'm like, I want to write a novel. Oh wait, I have no idea how to write a novel. So I spent an entire year reading books, and I had to actually force myself to stop reading books and actually start writing books, because I thought I had to learn all this stuff before I could actually start writing. And so over a 3-year period of time, I still read craft books almost daily. I still read craft books. So there's always something new to learn. And my favorite craft books are those that center around outlining and plotting. Go figure. And so it took me about 3 years to really develop a solid outline approach. And so I have a template that helps me expedite my plotting process. Is I have a very detailed outline, like template, that I fill in. So I know exactly what I need to do. And like I said, if I'm writing a 10,000 word short story, I know how many chapters I'm going to write. I know the length of those chapters. So I have these templates already in place, ready to fill in when I'm ready to start planning that particular type of story or length of story. But it took me like 3 years to really develop that process that works for me, because everybody's a little different. So what works for me may not work for you, and what works for somebody else might not work for the next person, because there are so many different types of plotting approaches out there and techniques to use. And the important part is finding the one that works for you, because that's what will help you get through it the easiest and the fastest. So now that I have that worked out, I can usually have a good outline done in about a week, spending it like 2 or 3 hours a day over a week's period of time.
Elsie says she needs to work on her reward system because she's like, I love stickers.
I have like whole books full of stickers. I have stickers everywhere. I love stickers. I mean, even like my current ones, it's just these little circles. They're just little circles. Yeah. Just being able to put one of these in my journal every day because I met my goal makes me so happy. Yeah. Because it's simple, it's silly, but it works. It works. It's just finding what works for you. And even when I start, like when I don't do this anymore, like because if I did, I wouldn't have any money probably, with the way I'm writing currently. But like when I would finish a novel, I had an end of novel reward system. And so like I love journals. I mean, go figure. The woman who loves planning loves journals. And I love custom made journals. And so like, this was my journal, this is a handmade journal that I rewarded myself with for finishing one of my novels. And it has my name embossed on it in gold, and so I just like things like this, like when you finish the project. So this was my reward for publishing Fortitude Rising. I had a journal that I rewarded myself for finishing the first draft, and this was my reward for publishing that first draft, that final draft. And so things like that help too. It's like, if you come up with something that you really, really want, it's like, okay, well, if I get this done, if I meet this goal of getting through NaNoWriMo and I write a full novel this month, 50,000 words, then I get this. This is now going to be mine. And so it works, and it was a big part of my initial success in getting to that point to where, I was able to write every single day and to get these things done. Like, what is it you love? What is something that you would really, really like to have? It can't just be something you need. Don't make it something you need. Make it something that you want, that is somewhat frivolous, that you normally wouldn't get for yourself, and make that your reward for achieving that goal.
My critique partners usually reward themselves with like 5 guys. So
5 guys. See, it can be
all
anything.
kinds
Whatever
of things.
Yeah.
It can be all kinds of things.
And right now, when I finish one novel, I reward myself by starting the next one.
Yeah.
Like, I literally don't even take a day's break. That's where I'm at now. But it's just like, it took me, like, that's now where because I do, this is a career for me. I don't look at this as just something that I'm doing. I love it. It's fun. But, I want this to be my life, and not, and I find it brings me that much joy that I don't need to take a break in between one story to the next. I almost can't wait to be able to start the next story. Like, that's where my excitement level is with writing. But it took me several years by implementing these techniques and tools to get to the point where I was capable of doing that every single day.
Miranda says, do you have a suggestion on a craft book about plotting for a pantser who might want to give it a try?
Plotting, so
Also
your
says
pants
Bird's Rule.
Let me see. There's this one called The Plot Whisperer. I loved this one. I read books, I mark them up. Craft books are the only books I let myself write in, by the way, and mark up. This one was really good. I know that.
What do you think about Save the Cat?
Save the Cat did not speak to me.
But I think that might speak to somebody who's a pantser, though.
See, I don't, yeah, maybe. I'm not, because the Save the Cat didn't speak to me. Maybe even the story equation. It didn't speak to me either. There's one called The Story Equation.
Mm-hmm.
If I get it. This one didn't really speak to me, but it might. But this one was less, like, what I liked about The Plot Whisperer is it was a little, it did focus on the 3-act structure, but it was more loosely applied. It wasn't like it wasn't like a hardcore, like, rigid structure approach to writing. So,
Megan,
and it was...
Megan's recommending Plot Embryo? Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of information online about that one. I haven't actually seen any books. Have you seen any books, Megan, about the Plot Embryo? But I know there's a lot of...
no.
It might be
it's
okay.
new. It's a newer approach.
Yeah. It's kind of like, if you're familiar with the hero's journey, it's a modified, condensed hero's journey approach to story development. Because it kind of focuses on that same, like, circle approach of this hero's journey, where you start and you go through the full change and you come back up and you come back to where you started. But it takes all the steps of the hero's journey and it kind of condenses it into fewer steps that I think make sense to most people. Or I should say, more broadly applicable to multiple genres. Sometimes the hero's journey is sometimes hard to apply to non-fantasy, sci-fi stories. And so the Plot Embryo kind of takes that same concept and breaks it down a little bit differently, but accomplishes the same thing as the hero's journey. From where you start, you go through the journey and you come back to where you began. And so, like, if you just do a Google search for the Plot Embryo, you'll find a lot of information online about it.
I recommended it because it is more of a character.
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say that I recommended it because it's a character driven. If you're presumably if you're a pantser, you might find plot itself a little off off-putting for you, but you might find characters really interesting and really like you want to dig into the nitty-gritty of that. And Plot Embryo is very, very, very character heavy. And so that is why I think you might, that's why I thought to recommend
And see,
it.
and then you have me so that I can communicate with
Right.
Megan and provide her critiques on her plots. I took the plot embryo and I inserted all my plot-driven plot points into the plot embryo so that I could actually communicate via the plot embryo.
I can almost read it completely. I'm like this close and this close to almost reading it completely, almost. But as soon as I finish this other thing, I might be able to do that. I'm very excited.
2 more suggestions on here. Yasmin Gailnorn has a podcast for pantsers. And then Colleen also suggested Jacqueline Garlick's Plot Mastery 101, Plot Smarter, Not Harder. Amy Parker really loves Larry Brooks. I forget the name of his right now, but Larry Brooks's book on, it's more like of a 4-act structure.
Okay. Yeah,
which
I
is
think
what she teaches in art. Yeah.
when I
teaches
first
more of a 4-act structure, but
yeah.
I don't know if that would be appealing to a pantser, because as a pantser, it is not appealing to me.
I did not like the 4-act structure, but I am very hardcore 3-act structure. You know, you have, and I like, even when it comes to like the plot embryo and like looking at that, I still have to break that up into the 3 acts. Like, okay, what's act 1, what's act 2, what's act 3, and then where's the mitten? Like, and I still have to apply all of my approach into that in order to even, because otherwise it doesn't make sense to me. It's like, oh, it's what I call the touchy-feely approach to mine.
So Colleen says it used to be called TikTok plot.
If you write fantasy, my all-time favorite book, and it's not really a hardcore plot structure. It's more focused on all the components to make a great fantasy, is one called The Fantasy Fiction Formula. This is my all-time favorite craft book. I've read this book 3 times now, I think.
I couldn't tell.
This is my all-time favorite book. I read this after I finished my first draft of Fortitude Rising, and this book inspired the rewriting process for my wonderful first draft of Fortitude Rising. So if you write fantasy, I highly recommend this craft book. It is fantastic.
I think we'll leave it there then.
Awesome.
Angela, thank you so much. This was really awesome. You knocked it out of the park. You mentioned knocking things out of the park, so to use that. You knocked it out of the park. And
see, that was like, as soon as I said that in my brain, I was like, ooh, I need to write a baseball romance.
Everybody is saying that it was so good. So thank you so much, Angela. And be on the lookout for the next How I Plan NaNoWriMo, even though some of us will not be talking about hardcore planning. Me. But the next one actually is Megan's, right? Megan will be on, Megan's going to talk on the 13th. It's early in the morning at 9 a.m. But we will have a recording.
On what date?
Cannot make it. Megan will be on the 13th. Laura Perez, Ellie Perez, she will be on the 17th, and hers, I believe, is at 3. And then I will do mine the last week of October, which I believe is the 25th Sunday, whatever the last Sunday is.
It's the 25th.
All of our events are always posted underneath the events tab on Facebook. So that's how you can keep up with us. We put everything there. And then, of course, we'll have write-ins. We have a ton of write-ins planned for November.
Well, thank you all for coming. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Angela,
For
y'all.
having us.